Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Joining us now, I'm pleased to say, is another member of President Trump's former cabinet, Wilbur Ross, former Commerce Secretary and the author of the book Risk and Returns, Creating Success in Business and Life, joins us now. Secretary, fantastic to have you with us. I want to start with the tariff deadline because you were on the record that July 9th, the original tariff deadline, was going to be very difficult to achieve. We did see that pushed back to August 1st, and I'm curious from where you're sitting, do you think that August 1st is achievable, or might we see another delay here?
Well, I think almost every major country has already submitted a counter-proposal to the Trump administration, trying to ward off the tariffs that otherwise will go into effect. So the real question is, will Trump accept what they have on the table? Will they put a little more on the table? Where will it come out? But worst comes to worst, he is fully prepared to go through with the tariffs, then have that be the end of the story.
You know, Secretary Ross, you also recently told Fortune magazine that, quote, "My one fear is that if our government feels too chesty with their progress, they may overplay the hand and get to levels that are hard, maybe even impossible for other countries to give in. It's easy to get carried away with early successes." Now, you've pointed to the success that the early administration has had in these discussions in these early phases, but what if they go too far? Do they risk doing damage to relationships as well as parts of the U.S. economy?
Well, first of all, there's already been $100 billion collected in tariffs, and it has not really adversely affected the economy. The estimates are that that total will get to around $300 billion by the end of the year. $300 billion on a full year basis is a little over 1% of our economy. But what will really happen, American consumers won't pay the whole 300. The importers will absorb some of it. The exporters will absorb some of it. Probably some of the foreign governments will also absorb part of it. So it's only a fraction of that I think will come to pass. And so what are you talking, a fraction of 1%? Well, you can't really even estimate the economy to within a fraction of 1%.
Interesting, but we know that it's some people's entire jobs to try to do exactly that. Let's talk about something that's even harder to measure, and that is confidence, investor confidence. I know that you made the point to Bloomberg News that sort of this tit for tat, the will he, won't he, when it comes to these tariff rates, that could erode investor confidence. And it was interesting to read into the Delta earnings this morning because we heard from CEO Ed Bastian that people are starting to understand with clarity where things are headed. That allows them to start making plans whether to travel or invest in a business. And when you take a look at the current landscape right now, heading towards potentially another deadline that could be pushed back for tariffs, do you think that investors have just gotten used to the uncertainty, or do you think we could be nearing a point where some of that calm starts to crack?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, the most recent unemployment report was very favorable. It was only 227,000 in that week. So there's no sign that employers have started to be more cautious about hiring people than they were. Second, I think the key will be knowing what the end game is. And assuming it gets resolved on the 1st of August or thereabouts, that will clear the air because businesses and markets can adjust to good news, they can adjust to bad news. What they have trouble adjusting to is uncertainty. And so one way or another, I believe things will be clarified around the 1st of August.
Why do you have confidence in that August 1st deadline, especially when we see some areas in which the Trump administration has been escalating the tariff wars here? You look at Brazil, for example, and the escalation there is quite severe. So why would August be a thick and final?
Well, first of all, the Brazil is a one-off. It's a very unusual talk about tariff because it doesn't have to do with imports and exports. It has to do with President Trump's anger at the way the Brazilian government is treating the former leader, Bolsonaro, who's very friendly with the president. So that's a one-off. I don't think it tells you much about anything else that he's doing.
Well, let's talk about that, Secretary, because you described that as a one-off, the situation with Brazil, but there is some worry there that we're really pushing into other realms, that we're not using these tariff measures just for trade anymore, and that this could set a precedent.
Well, President already sets the precedent. Remember back in the early days of this administration when he went after Mexico because they weren't helping him with the border and with controlling fentanyl. So he's used it with Europe in terms of the contribution of the various EU member states to defense budgets, as they're supposed to do with NATO. So the difference between the last administration of Trump and this one is he is using tariffs much more broadly. He's using the tariffs for achieving what you might call diplomatic or other roles having not much to do with tariffs. So the Bolsonaro thing, the fentanyl, there are a number of things like that he's been using tariffs for. And I think the reason he's able to do that, or feels he is we learned in the first administration just how extensively the president can use tariffs without going back to Congress. Historically, the Senate has played a very major role in tariffs. This president has not taken anything by the way of tariffs to the Congress. And he's got some more things that'll be coming down the road. He has Secretary Lutnick doing 232 investigations on pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and probably other things. And 232 is what we used originally to put on the steel and aluminum tariffs.
Well, Secretary, what do you make of that push, as you described it, using tariffs for really expansive purposes outside of trade? We heard from former Vice President Mike Pence this morning. It seems like he disagrees with that push, and I just wonder what your opinion is.
Well, yes, I think Vice President Pence has tended to disagree with a number of the tariff decisions that President Trump has made. So that doesn't surprise me too much at all. But he is the president. He is making the decisions that he decides to make. And while some of them probably eventually will be challenged in court, for the most part, the courts have been pretty good in coming in on his side. And as I said, that's what gives him the confidence to be a bit more expansive.
Secretary, you're also on the side, very interestingly, about to join the board of a company focused on crypto. This company, Reserve One, is merging with a SPAC, going public. We spoke to the CEO of Reserve One a little bit earlier this week, and she actually mentioned your involvement, had mentioned that perhaps in the past you might not have been keen on crypto, but now are obviously taking a much bigger stance by joining this company, which is focused on Bitcoin treasury. Why did you change your mind? Are you a believer now in crypto more broadly, or is there something about Bitcoin that you are now latching onto as the administration warms up to crypto?
Right. Well, what has changed? My objection to crypto in the beginning had been that it was a little bit like the Wild West. You didn't really have government regulation. You didn't have government supervision. You didn't have professional investors really active in it. But look at now. Here you have President Trump getting all sorts of regulatory things through, and in fact, getting into the crypto business themselves. You've got BlackRock, Fidelity funds, and others coming in. You have Strategy and others using corporate treasury and arbitraging capital markets into Bitcoin. So what's happening is you're getting away from the retail Wild West and into a more professional environment. And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish with Reserve One, is bring a batch of professional skills, both broadly investing and specifically knowledge of Bitcoin and the other competitors. So the world is changing. It's becoming widely accepted as an appropriate institutional class, and therefore the environment is changed. And I think that's the important thing. For example, the trading of late has been mostly what they call whales on the sell side. Those are retail individuals who had accumulated 1,000 or more coins in the old days and therefore have now made a big fortune out of it. Those are tending to sell, and who's buying are the ETFs, people like Strategy, and all sorts of institutional investors. Larry Fink is widely quoted as saying he recommends that 5% of portfolios should be in Bitcoin. Santander, big Spanish bank, they're recommending to their clients 7%. So what's happening is you're getting away from the wild and woolly, unregulated, mostly retail market into one that's very much more professionalized. And I think that's a healthier thing.
Right.
And
Unfortunately, Secretary, we're up against the clock. Really looking forward to seeing your progress with Reserve One. And you're right in that this has become a much more mature cryptocurrency market. Really appreciate your time this morning. That is Wilbur Ross. He is the former U.S. Secretary of Commerce.